The Rocky and Creed films are famous for their final fights against the main opponents. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 8 final opponents from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the Rocky and Creed final opponents. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. With that said, let's get started. Number 8, Tommy Gunn from Rocky 5. The problem here is that he was just a deeply unlikable character from beginning to end.
Look, the guy's like Duke. You know what he is? He's a vampire. Man, I ain't you, and you ain't Mick. Man, when are you gonna understand that?
And his arc is essentially Rocky pours into him, and for reasons that aren't really compelling or interesting, he turns on Rocky, and therefore they have a street fight.
I'd like to thank the man who made this happen. Mr. George, what's that do?
But you just don't care about him at all. He's just a jerk that you want to see Rocky take him out, but not in a compelling way, not in an inspiring way, not in a way that reveals something new about Rocky or challenges Rocky in a new way. No, this is just kind of a failure from Rocky that has led to this total monster being unleashed and this street fight from this entitled jerk that doesn't have control of his emotions and wants to fight Rocky because the movie needs to have a final fight where Rocky shows up.
I love you, man. You know that? You and me were supposed to be like this, Tommy. You blew it.
So it didn't really work for me as a final fight, and the arc itself I don't think was the right direction to go. I think what they did in the Creed movies was the right direction to go with this type of character, and thus making one of Rocky's mentees the villain, the opponent, just a bad idea from the get-go. Number 7, Ricky Conlan from Creed, as well as a little bit in Creed 3. I just don't think he's a particularly interesting character. He's not designed to be particularly interesting. He's a more realistic character, unlike, say, an Ivan Drago or a Clubber Lang. But he's just kind of this abrasive, confrontational boxer person that creates a situation for Adonis to get his fight, to be able to represent himself and show that he's not a mistake. But as a character in and of himself, Ricky doesn't really have a character arc. He doesn't really grow or change. He gives a little bit of respect to Adonis at the very end of the movie after the fight, but it's not really him having any revelation or anything like that. So you're left with just his personality, and he's just kind of this aggressive guy that likes to get in fights with people, talks trash, which serves the plot, serves Adonis, but doesn't make him particularly compelling. Next, Mason the Line Dixon from Rocky Balboa. Now, I actually think they do a much better job with Mason the Line Dixon than they did with Ricky Conlan, where, while Mason the Line Dixon is a much more grounded, realistic opponent, they give his character time in the film. And you spend time with him learning about his struggles as someone that has gained the belt, but at the same time hasn't really earned the respect of the audience. And so he really struggles with the fact that he's done everything he's supposed to do, yet people still don't like him. And so he's going back to his roots. And he resents the fact that he has to do this show with Rocky, and he thinks it's beneath him.
Ain't nothing over till it's over.
What's that from, in the 80s?
That's probably in the 70s.
And through that, he's actually challenged. He doesn't think that Rocky has anything to offer, and thus through the fight, he realizes, like, oh, like, this is what a real boxer is like. What people were saying was right. It doesn't mean that he's not the champ, but it also meant that he could learn and grow just a little bit. So I feel like this was a character that they gave more time to so that they could do kind of the Ricky Conlan thing, except it was done better in the previous film with Mason the Line Dixon. One of the reasons he's not particularly high on the list is he's also not all that memorable as a character. because he is a little bit more grounded and you have such lively personalities with the other ones, he's also, much like Ricky Conlan, not particularly likable. He's condescending. That means you enjoy it when Rocky starts to unload on him, but he doesn't do anything to stand out beyond that. It's probably a lot of that is the simple fact that both of these characters are being played by actual boxers, not actors, and so they didn't want to, obviously put them in a scenario to look bad as an actor, so they just kind of did their own thing with their own personalities, but it meant that he doesn't really stand out. But I do actually like the arc that they gave him in the way that even in the final fight, he finds a way to respect himself more and earns the respect of the audience, essentially by having Rocky beat the crap out of him for 15 rounds, while at the same time, he's beating the crap out of Rocky. Number 5, Clubber Lang. Now, he's kind of the total opposite of Mason the Line Dixon. Mason the Line Dixon actually does have a character arc, a backstory, and therefore in the final fight, it means something what takes place there, but he doesn't have much of an interesting personality. Now, Mr. T is all personality.
No, I don't hate Balboa, but I pity the fool.
He is the Mr. T persona in a Rocky movie, and that's just very entertaining to see. This was just such a larger-than-life personality that dominated 80s culture and was brought to the forefront by Rocky III. And so, iconic, memorable, but it's a personality. It's not really a character.
Dead meat.
There's, a little bit about him kind of coming from the streets, but you don't dive anything beyond the persona that is Mr. T. You don't learn what makes him tick, why he fights, why he's so violent, why he's so, talking, very trashy towards Adrian right in front of Rocky. You want a real man? Doing all that stuff. We don't learn anything really about him on any deeper level. And so kind of still in that middle section for me of a fun personality, very memorable, but not a lot of actual character there. Number 4, Viktor Drago from Creed 2, as well as just a little bit of Creed 3. And I'm a big fan of the Drago saga, and if they decide to do a Drago spinoff, I think I'm very on board for that, even in light of the little taste that we got of what Drago has been up to since Creed 2. But what makes him so compelling is, first off, he's just an absolute beast, a specimen of a physique of just looks so intimidating. As much as Dolph looked intimidating back in the 80s, just towering over Stallone, the Big Nasty, this guy looks incredible as just a specimen in the ring. But beyond that, what I loved about what they did with Creed 2 is gave a lot more meat to the Drago family. And not that they're super complex people, but it made them actual characters, where you have this guy that was raised in shame, abandoned by his upper class mother, that just sees his father and him as embarrassments. And he's been raised his entire life to make his name great again by defeating the people that embarrassed his family. So he's raised in hate and in resentment, and he's not even on the same page as his father, where they have this dinner scene where he's there with his mother, and he's just like storms off out of rage that these people would reject him and his father. His loyalty is to his father, and he wants to make his father proud, not these people that rejected him. And he's going to do whatever it takes in order to win. I just love that. And then even the little specks of updates we get about him in Creed 3, where he's a much more balanced person. That the exposure that would come from, if you've seen Creed 2, he actually won the first fight. He just disqualified himself with an illegal punch, but he obviously was winning the fight. When you do that, you're getting a lot of exposure and getting a lot of opportunities, and you see him as a much more balanced person that has even made amends with the Creed family. And I love those sorts of arcs where you actually have people in there that grow and they change. And so he's not being played by an amazing thespian, and thus we've seen thus far from him. He's being played by an actual athlete. They gave him more of a story than the other two athletes that are on this list. And so hopefully we'll get to see kind of more of that. Not incredible depth just yet, but I think they've done a good job of making him a compelling character with what's been on the table thus far. Real quick, before I give you my top 3, remember to join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the Rocky Creed opponents. Also, I've done a bunch of these other rankings, the movies, the final fights, the training montages, as well as reviews of about half of the movies in this franchise. You can check that out in this playlist right up here. In third, Ivan Drago from Rocky 4 as well as Creed 2. And going into this movie, they wanted to set up a David versus Goliath situation, so they cast an actor who just towered over Sylvester Stallone and then told a story about this freakishly powerful Russian that is so powerful he's able to kill Apollo Creed in the ring in just 2 rounds, and then he is a stone cold killer. Afterwards, he does not care that he just killed Apollo Creed. All he cares about is that he won and that he is making Russia proud. He lives to earn the respect of these higher ups. That is what defines his life. And he's set up to be this unbelievably powerful fighter, and thus creating a scenario where Rocky Balboa, the 2-time heavyweight champion, is once again an underdog. And it's so simplistic, but also so just like pure revenge in the boxing ring that just makes for this epic showdown where you have like 12 minutes straight of training montage, contrasting their training styles, and then this massive epic fight ending with this monologue. And it's just designed to make Ivan Drago an actual supervillain. A killer supervillain in the Rocky franchise. It's cartoonish, but it fit this era of the movies. And then, jump forward 35 years almost, over 30 years, you do Creed 2, and they move the character into this new era that's much more grounded, and they take the 80s supervillain opponent in the Rocky, the most over-the-top Rocky movie, and make him into a real character. And what would the rest of his life be in light of his failure in Rocky 4?
Hey, look, that's like 1,000,000 years ago.
Like yesterday to me.
And they add layers and depth to him. He's not a complex guy. He just lives to try and earn respect for his name and the respect of a certain group of people. And that continues to define his life. And then he pours that into his son and makes it define his son's life. And by the end of the second movie, he ends up being the character that kind of has this shift and change in Creed 2. Is that shift and change in the final fight of realizing I actually care a lot more about my son than I care about the respect of these people that never actually cared about me. And I care about my son, and they don't actually care about my son. They never cared about me. They just cared about what I could do for them. They don't care about my son. They just care about what he could do for them. I think I was wrong. I care about my son more. And you see that shift, and this cartoonish character, or caricature, really a supervillain, becomes a character in Creed 2. And so he's iconic, he's memorable, but there's also character in there and something interesting and compelling. Our runner-up, Damian Anderson from Creed 3. And the great thing about Creed 3 really is Damian Anderson. And they came up with a character that challenges Adonis Creed in a new and interesting way that's different from any of the other opponents in this franchise. He goes all the way back to his childhood. And in doing so, there's personal ties and connections.
Damn, it's
Been a minute.
There's failures of Adonis and things that he should have done. in the past that drive the actions of Damien, but Damien himself is just a very rough around the edges character. He has a chip on his shoulder for a reason.
You must be punchy. Because if memory serves, you used to carry my gloves.
And he's a vicious, dangerous fighter in the ring. He's designed to be the most conniving of any of the opponents that we've had in any of these films up to this point in time, where he's actually manipulating things. He's playing against the trust and he knows that Adonis will have towards him.
If Apollo Creed could take a chance on some underdog, why can't you?
And so there's all these additional layers to him, and I think Jonathan Majors, of our opponents in here, is probably the finest actor out of the bunch, and is able to play sympathetic while also being terrifying at the same time. He can play between those two emotions, and in doing so creates this very well-rounded character. And he's distinctly in the villain category, but that doesn't mean you don't understand where he's coming from. And that's where I think you have a compelling character, and especially as you kind of move into the final moments, where you have two guys that were raised essentially as brothers. One of them has lived with kind of resentment for decades, and then in more recent times watched in deep, deep resentment as Adonis has gained the life that he thought he was going to have. But in the final moments, he's able to even realize that was all nonsense. This was not your fault. This is not something that was on you. And is able to grow and change. And that's where you have a full, well-rounded character that is interesting and compelling, and with just one movie appearance instantly shot up this list of best opponents in a franchise filled with iconic opponents, and he's immediately one of the best. But easily coming in at number one for me is Apollo Creed. And what I love about Apollo Creed is while he's the opponent in the first two films, he's never presented as an actual antagonist or a villain. He doesn't actually do anything wrong. He has character flaws that he underestimates his opponents frequently. He puts being a showman ahead of being a boxer on a number of occasions that has dire consequences for him on multiple occasions. He's very proud and prideful. He has flaws, but he's not portrayed as a villain. In fact, in the original Rocky, he's the one that gives Rocky a chance. He's the one that's presented as being this very intelligent businessman that comes up with the idea to do kind of this underdog fight on the bicentennial. He's the one that comes up with that idea. He gives Rocky his shot. He's not even like rude or mean to Rocky until they're in the fight and Rocky lands a punch that knocks him over, where he realizes, oh crap, this guy's an actual boxer.
I don't believe it.
And then he suddenly starts talking trash to Rocky, which is actually a sign of respect. And then you go into the second movie and his ego is bruised, that people thought the fight was fixed, and all of a sudden he like has to prove himself. But even then, even his antagonism towards Rocky is about the fact that he knows that someone has actually challenged him. Someone is a worthy opponent. That leads, of course, into the later films where when he sees Rocky lose, his reaction is to go out to him, be like, dude, that was not your best fight. That was not the guy that I fought. We need to get that guy back. That forms that friendship. I love that there was both two movies where he's the opponent. He's just another character in the movies with a strong characterization that's not a caricature. Mr. T's iconic, he's fun, he's memorable, but he's a caricature. Some of these are like, even like Ivan Drago, he was brought in as just a villain. He's not really a character when he was introduced. He's just Russian weapon. Apollo was always a great, captivating, interesting character. And when you rewatch the original Rocky now, like there's so many details about the way that he's designed that it gives reason as to why Rocky can even perform really well against him.
Hey, champ. You ought to come look at this boy you're gonna fight on TV.
Looks like he means business.
Yeah, I mean business too.
Because the movie's designed so well and crafted and thought out in ways that some of the other ones that I also love aren't crafted nearly as intricately as the original Rocky, and so much of that goes to the characterization. So for me, Apollo is just such a pivotal piece of the Rocky saga, and the reason that it stood the test of time, the reason that you can make a franchise about Adonis, his son, is because Apollo was such a fantastic character. So for me, of course, Apollo Creed comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, remember I've got other videos just like it ranking the movies, final fights, training montages, as well as a bunch of reviews of the movies in the Rocky and Creed franchise. That is right over there in that playlist. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.